The two Soweto boys, aged 5 and 6, who were brutally murdered and mutilated, have been laid to rest. The funeral service was held at White City earlier. The suspects, who were arrested in connection with this gruesome act, appeared in court at the same time as the boys' funeral. eNCA's Manqoba Mchunu has been following that story for us. Manqoba, I can't imagine how difficult this day must have been for the families, especially knowing that the suspects in this case are close relatives.
It was very difficult, Andy, I can tell you that. And in fact, I think for many of the family members, it's still surreal. They're still in disbelief and shocked at the fact that one of their own is responsible for such a heinous crime. Of course, the family also finding out when the police had made those arrests earlier this week. And I mean, to many, it's still quite, unbelievable that a grandmother of this child, Rabanye, is the one that has been fingered for murder, given that, first of all, she was the only guardian that was staying with Rabanye at the time, and the parents had died, and so he was orphaned. And this is a person that they looked up to for protection, somebody who they thought, they could trust the child with. So, many of the family members are still in disbelief, and it has tore the family apart. And we saw a scuffle that broke out yesterday between the family members who, are still trying to process really what went through the mind of this grandmother. And this is a grandmother that was quite outspoken. This is somebody who even spoke to the media, not once, maybe on 3 occasions, where she spoke, of the pain the family was feeling, of the loss and the trauma that they'd gone through as a family. So I think, for many of those family members, they still want answers, only. They still want to question her. And I spoke to a mother earlier on of one of the victims, Ngobizita Zulu, who was a cousin of Rabanye, who said that she still just wants to ask from, this lady, her name is Ngobile Ndlovu, the 50-year-old woman who was, of course, arrested alongside her boyfriend. Why did she commit this? And what really was the cause for all of this? Because they still don't have the answers up until now. And they're now looking at this case closely. They're looking at the courts, hoping for some sort of justice. But only it was quite emotional scenes at the funeral, as you can imagine, when the 2 coffins, the small coffins, were brought inside that stadium. And of course, many of the people still saying that they will want, justice to take its place. They want to see strong punishment for those that are involved in this crime. But I spoke to one of the family members earlier on, and this is what she had to say.
Jabulile kakhulu ukuthi uboshiwe bamtholile umuntu obulale uNqobizitha, kodwa sisasebuhlungwini sanombuzo ukuthi why wenzeni. Sifuna ukubuza nje lokho kuphela ngoba sisasebuhlungwini kamampela, isilonde singeke siphinde siphole kithi angakasitshela ukuthi why umenzeni uNqobile. Hey, besicela inkantolo ithathe umthetho because asesizwile labantu. Sesizwile lento le bengiyazela kude maye seyifike kimi ke maye ila ibhlungu khona ke hayi inkantolo ayithathe umthetho imbophe angazi noma ngathatha ikhizi lahlelele kude because akusumuntu emphakathini lomuntu ewumama futhi akusumuntu.
Manqoba, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi has vowed to fight crime and violence in the province. What did he have to say at today's funeral?
Well, the Premier basically, thanking the police and the law enforcement officials for their speedy resolution of this case. Of course, you know that when these murders were committed, the police as well as the Gauteng provincial officials were there on the scene. Some of them, at least, or days after they came to the scene to console the families, and they promised that they are going to make sure that they put resources to try and deal with this murder. And of course, we saw the task team that was appointed. We also saw members of the occult unit that were also deployed to look into this issue. Of course, there's still questions whether or not this was Muti-related, but of course, when you look at the way that these boys were killed, many of the community members and family members will tell you that they firmly believe that this is Muti-related. But the police, had worked hard, and we understand that, Andy, they even used CCTV footage from one of the premises just close to where these boys were snatched, and that's how they managed to catch these individuals. And of course, the testimony of that 5-year-old who survived and the evidence that he had given to police was also crucial in the police's case to arrest us. So the Premier thanking not only the police for their speedy resolution of this, but also the community patrol, who you remember were the first on scene. They were the ones that worked with police searching for these boys overnight until the early hours of the morning, and it was in fact the community patrollers that found these 2 boys. So thanking them for for their effort and for their role in trying to resolve this issue, but equally saying that those that are behind this should face the full might of the law. They should know that the law is not going to be lenient to them, and that they should really answer as to why they committed these heinous crimes. So the Premier speaking there at that event, and also promising that they will ensure that they beef up police in the area to ensure that none of these incidents occur again. But let's take a listen to what he had to say.
We must resist to exposing our children to death rather than carriers. We must resist for allowing our school children to come here and say goodbyes, whereas they have to say things that will make things better for them. And those that felt they can do these deeds without being traced, they were wrong. And those that will be appearing in court this morning, they must know one thing and one thing only: we have no mercy and sorry for them. And those that will be facing the criminal justice this morning, they must know one thing and one thing: all the bad lucks that we have collectively as society, we are throwing back at them.
Manqoba, can you tell us what happens next in terms of the court appearances? It sounds as if the police have a very strong case, but of course the suspects are presumed innocent until found guilty, and that's where the court takes over from the police to make sure that they are able to achieve a successful conviction.
Indeed, and in fact the prosecutors made it clear in court that they'd found evidence that they believe links these two to the crime. This is, of course, you recall the plastic bag that was found with clothing that was stained with blood. But not only that, we heard from the prosecutors that they have also found some of the body parts that belonged to these children. And of course, they'll be looking, the families will be looking at the courts to try and solve this issue. But as far as the case is concerned, they will be appearing on the 5th of May, and this is for bail application. They did indicate that they will apply for bail in court. And of course, the issue also around the lawyers, the 50-year-old grandmother saying that she's going to get her own lawyers to represent her, while the 39-year-old said he's going to use legal aid. So those are the issues that are going to be finalized on the 5th of May. And of course, we're expecting the bail hearing to also resume on that day.
Thank you so much for that update. eNCA's Manqoba Mchunu talking to us about that horrific case.